Art with Mr. Posey. Pop art portraits.
Hello again, Cole Colts. Mr. Posey here. This week, for our art project, we're going to be looking at a style of art called pop art. Pop art is a style of art invented in the 1950s and 1960s, which tried to do a few different things. First of all, the subject matter, or what the art is about. The pop artists wanted to make it something that anyone could recognize. Andy Warhol did lots of art about Campbell's soup cans. When you see pop art, you'll see lots of bright, solid colors, black outlines, and things done in sort of a comic book or cartoon style. This week for your project, I want you to use the pop art style to make a portrait of a celebrity, someone who is famous, someone who lots of people would know about. Your celebrity choice could be a sports player, a singer, a musician, a YouTube star, a movie star, a scientist, a politician, anybody that you can find a picture of online and that lots of people would recognize. We're also going to use some tracing methods this time. So if you have a printer and you can print out a picture in black and white, I think that's the best way to do it. However, if you don't have a printer or can't print out a black and white picture, you can either put your paper against a computer screen, or if you're feeling skillful, you could just look at a portrait of someone and try to look and copy it the best that you can. We want something that looks realistic, like real life. And if we can't do that by just looking at a picture, well, we should just use the tricks we have available, like tracing or printing. I'm going to show you a few different ways that you can make a pop art portrait of one of your favorite celebrities.
For my first person, I chose singer Billie Eilish. I printed out a picture in black and white on my home printer and set the settings to low so it didn't use up too much ink. Now I have a couple different kinds of Sharpies here. I have my extra fine point, and then I have my fine point. If you have an extra fine point Sharpie, that will work best, but a regular Sharpie will work too, as long as it's still pretty pointy. The idea is that I take my extra fine point Sharpie or fine point Sharpie and I trace over all of the main lines of my printed picture. I go really slow and try to stay right on the lines that I see. And as you can see, the line that I draw transfers to the back of the paper. Going around my eyes very carefully, a circle around the iris and a black dot in the center. Eyes have a line right above them called the eyelid fold, which is important, and then I outline the eyebrows as a shape that I can color later. I flip my paper over a lot to see what I have so far and make sure I didn't miss anything. You can do eyelashes if they're big eyelashes, but if someone doesn't have big eyelashes, I would leave the eyelashes off. For the nose, if the head is angled to the side, you'll see this line going down the center of the face. I'll carefully go around the nostrils at the bottom, and then around each lip very carefully. Most upper lips have a little bit of an indent in the center, too. I'm really carefully going around the outline of the face, right up into the hairline, and there's a little dip where the hair parts. If hair is falling down in clumps, I'm going to try to outline those clumps as shapes. I'm ignoring all the really little hairs and trying to turn the clumps of hair into larger shapes. If there are obvious lines going up through the hair, I can trace those also, but mostly I just need to do my outlines. Sometimes something will be hard to see, and you kind of have to make an artistic judgment as to where it goes. Like my shoulder here. It's hard to see where it is, but I can kind of guess that it's about there. I'll go over lots of the little details down here in the shirt and trying to find all of the main shapes and carefully trace over them so they're transferred to the back of the paper. It's looking pretty realistic. There's a few more details down here on the clothing that I'd like to trace. Anything that pops out to me? If there are words and you trace them, they are going to be backwards on the back. I want to give my image a frame around the edge, so I'll use a ruler and trace the rectangle to show where the edges of my image go. Holding down my ruler tight so it doesn't move. And now I have all my lines traced for my Billie Eilish portrait. The next step is to go over all of the lines again on the back. When they go through the paper, they're a little spotty, but by going over them again, they become solid and black. I'm carefully tracing over everything that I did, so I have a nice realistic line drawing on the back of my page. I'll give it that rectangle around the edge, and there it is, my line drawing. I bought a couple new packages of Crayola markers for this project, and because I just wanted some nice fresh markers to use for my projects. I have lots of color choices, and for a pop art piece, colors don't need to be realistic. In fact, they shouldn't be realistic. You should use bright colors wherever you think they should go, and just make some artistic choices as you go along. When I do a shape, I like to outline it first and then fill in the center. I really think about the direction of my coloring too, because as you can see, it creates some lines, and I wanted those to go to the direction of the hair. Some other hair pieces I use a slightly darker blue, and then a really dark blue down here where it might be in a shadow. For the skin, I like to use a light color, like yellow, light purple, something like that. For mine, I did yellow. And a different yellow for the neck. A nice dark purple for the lips, green in the eyes, and then I'm just going to choose some bright colors to fill in the clothing. My goal here is to make my shapes nice and solid, filled in all the way as smooth as I can. I'm often using the side of the tip of the marker and not the pointy part because it colors much more smoothly. If I'm doing little details, I'll use that pointy tip, but mostly I'm coloring with the side or the edge of the marker. I'll fill in my background with this nice light green. I didn't have any green yet. And I have made my pop art portrait of Billie Eilish. Now I want to do one of Bob Ross. Bob Ross is one of my favorite painters. He used to have a show that I would paint along with, and this is a picture of him with his pet baby raccoon. I printed out a picture of Bob Ross, and for this one, I'm going to use my fine tip Sharpie or a normal tip Sharpie to show you what it looks like if you don't have an extra fine point. Going around things like eyes or small details can be a little more difficult if you don't have an extra fine point Sharpie, but I wanted to show you that it does still work. Carefully going over some main shapes, some wrinkles in the face if they're part of the person's character, a bumpy line around the hair, and then some lines to show my baby raccoon over on this side. I'm looking for different shapes of gray, black, and colors in the background to trace as well, and then I'll use my ruler to trace the outline of the image. Then on the back, I'll retrace everything again, and I have my line drawing. I'm going to really fast color in my picture with lots of bright colors here. The reason I speed up my videos is because it takes me quite a long time to color these pictures, and I don't want you to have to watch an hour-long video about how to make art. So this should take you some time, but there it is, my pop portrait of Bob Ross. Now I want to show you a way to do this project if you don't have access to a printer. With this method, I look up an image on the internet and I put it on my computer screen. Then, I put my white paper over the computer screen and try to trace the shapes through the paper. As you can see, when I put my white paper over the computer screen, it's really hard to see what's going on. It helps if it's darker in the room. So I'm going to turn off some lights, close the blinds, and as you can see, I can see my image much better now that I turned some lights off. Now don't use Sharpie when you do this. Can you imagine what would happen if the Sharpie went through the paper onto the computer? That would be bad. I'm going to use pencil, just like I did in my other portraits, and trace out all of my main shapes. I'm going slow and careful, trying to hold my paper still. I made a mistake, so I can erase it because I'm using pencil, and if I get off, I can line it back up. Carefully tracing the shape of the glasses, I'll go in and do the outline of the eye, the iris, and the pupil, and that eyelid fold on each eye. You can check under your paper to see what you're missing if it's hard to see, as long as you get the paper back to the same spot. At the bottom of the nose here, it was hard to see what shapes were going on, so I'm just going to trace that black shadow shape instead, because that's all I can see, and I don't want to make something up that isn't there. Around my lips, some wrinkles in the face. This over here is a dog that Andy's holding, and I'm just going to see what I can see through the paper and try to trace out the main shapes. In the hair, there's a nice dark shape in the center I want to outline, making sure that those little frayed edges of the hair are there. A little bit in the background, and then I'll lightly go over the edge. And I have a pretty good, realistic pencil drawing now of Andy Warhol. I'll use my ruler to put the edge of the image in a little more clearly. And now my pencil drawing is done, and I'm ready to color. Since I used pencil, I'm going to use colored pencil for the coloring on this one. And I put my paper on a sketchbook because my desk isn't very smooth and it changes what the colored pencil looks like. Now I collect art supplies, so I have lots of colorful colored pencils. But for you, just use what you have, or use your favorite. With this colored pencil, I'm going lightly, barely touching the paper to get a light tone. But I can use the same, pressing harder, to get a darker tone of the same color. I'm going to do that a couple times in my art. In the hair, I'm pressing lightly with my turquoise, and then pressing harder to get a darker turquoise tone in the same shape. Since this over here is hair also, I'm going to use that same turquoise color so that the picture makes sense. The eyebrows are hair. For lips, the bottom lip is usually a lighter color than the top lip. A nice bright neon orange for the glasses to really give it some pop, and then a darker orange for the edges of the frames. For my background, I'll use the side of the tip so it goes a little faster and smoother. And like I said before, I often like to color the outside edge before I fill in the middle. I'll jump ahead a little bit, and there it is, a colored pencil pop portrait of Andy Warhol. And here are the 3 pop portraits I made: Billie Eilish, Bob Ross, and Andy Warhol.
So, choose somebody that's famous that you really want to honor through making a piece of art about them. Use some kind of tracing method to get a realistic line drawing of that person. And then use markers, colored pencils, or watercolor paint to fill in your spaces with bright, bold colors. I hope you're enjoying your short week, Colts. I am excited to see your pop art portraits, and I will talk to you very soon. Go Colts!